Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on behalf of President of the Urban Mayors Association, Mayor Mapp, and all of the members of the Urban Mayors Association. We welcome you to Connecting Infrastructure, Transportation, and Housing Redevelopment. Earlier today, we had a wonderful panel and seminar where Mayor Mapp, the president of the Urban Mayors Association, moderated regarding the specific topics around brownfields and affordable housing. And as we continue in that same theme, considering affordable housing and as you're moving forward, considering transportation and infrastructure, we have the blessing and the great privilege to be joined by some of the sharpest, most dynamic minds and leaders, not only in these specific fields, but in general in the state of New Jersey. This panel will be addressing those specific issues, and we will have your questions at the end. I'm looking to make sure that we start on time and finish on time. So as moderator, my goal is to operate a little bit like the tracks when it comes to the train. I am not the train. My goal is to make sure I can get the train moving, so I need to do my parts. I'm going to minimize my words, and I'm going to try to do an introduction on each of the panelists. So if you bear with me as I read, and Mayor Mapp this morning just very quickly shared that he was having problems with his eyesight today, and I will confess I've been having problems with my eyesight for a while, but my condition is called age, so I just learned I have to use reading glasses, so I'm going to try to work this out. First, I want to begin with introducing Mayor Baraka. Mayor Ross Baraka of the city of Newark, the leader of the state's largest city. He has been at the forefront of driving economic growth and ensuring affordability for residents. Under his leadership, the city has implemented an award-winning master plan that fosters sustainability development. He also spearheaded the complete replacement of all lead service lines at no cost to residents, a monumental achievement in public health and safety. Mayor Baraka works tirelessly to provide access to affordable housing and essential resources, empowering residents to thrive and ensuring the city remains a place of opportunity for all. And just on a personal point of privilege, I have had the privilege of actually attending some of his seminars where he has welcomed residents, developers, and many stakeholders to come together as they have had very real, impactful, and poignant conversations on how to ensure that the approach in regards to the progress of our state's largest city is one where everyone has a part. And I'm a big admirer and a fan. Thank you, Mayor, so very much for being with us. We also have Mayor Jody Veller, City of Salem, more than 10 years of leadership experience within the non-for-profit sector and a passion for creating strategies and partnerships to advance the mission of an organization and the community that it serves. Allow me to share a few of her career highlights as mayor. Bringing the first AmeriCorps state and national program to Salem City, also successfully writing self-help housing grants at 2 organizations that were funded by the USDA for purchase, repair of housing for low-income families, and at Stand Up for Salem, creating 16 different not-for-profit programs, managed 6 major grants, and has awarded $1.4 million in funding and $410 million in loans. It's a little bit. We also have our Assemblywoman, Linda Carter. Linda Carter, affectionately known as New Jersey's Wonder Woman. I know I said that clearly, but it merits repeating. Linda Carter, affectionately known as New Jersey's Wonder Woman, has spent her entire career fighting for the underprivileged and middle-class communities. She has served locally for nearly 2 decades as a member of the Plainfield City Council and as a member of the Union County Board of Chosen Freeholders, now known as County Commissioners, earning a reputation as a bold, progressive, and pragmatic trailblazer willing to take on a wide array of challenges that affect her community. On May 24th, 2018, Linda Carter, a lifelong resident of the city of Plainfield, was appointed to serve as a member of the New Jersey General Assembly, representing the 22nd Legislative District, comprised of Union, Middlesex, and Somerset counties, to fill the vacancy caused by the late Assemblyman Gerald B. Green. Shortly thereafter, Assemblywoman Linda Carter was elected at a special election held on November 6, 2018, to fill the unexpired term. Currently, she serves as the chair of the Higher Education Committee and vice chair of the Transportation and Independent Authorities, and serves on the New Jersey Legislative Black Caucus. Thank you. We had to cap her resume. We specifically asked for just 10% of the accomplishments. We also have the privilege of having Carly Foster Arcadis. Arcadis. Carly Foster is with Arcadis U.S. Water Management Practice Director and Executive Sponsor for Arcadis National Funding Team. In her role, she helps ensure our teams understand, or their teams understand, and are capable of responding to and proactively problem solving to address city, state, infrastructure, and private sector resilience needs. Carly has been integral to the funding of more than $5 billion in resilience-related projects and has helped create resilience programs from the ground up at scales from individual facility to organization to neighborhood to city to region to state. Her expertise spans initial problem identification and risk quantification, stakeholder engagement, solution development, whether policy, programmatic, or physical in nature, implementation planning and support, benefit cost analysis, funding program, grant and project management, training and capacity building, curriculum development, and post-disaster loss avoidance assessment. That's it? No, so I'm sorry. It's a lot. It's great. Carly also serves as an elected trustee for the village in which she resides, term 2022-2027. She serves as the liaison for economic development and tourism, transportation and mobility, government efficiency and policy, the office of the clerk, public education, and parks and recreation. Thank you. As I mentioned, we have an amazing and wonderful panel, and I want to get right to the questions. I'm going to begin with questions that are open to any of the panelists, and they can respond. The first question, what role do you see infrastructure improvements playing in the future of housing development in your city, particularly in terms of access to affordable housing and public transportation? Would anyone like to? Do I need to repeat it, or? Okay,
that
Carly.
makes it easy for everybody. And I can also apologize for the length of that. I'm up here with some very esteemed members, and I'm honored to be here today. So I'll be very quick. I think that we all need to recognize, and many of the folks in this room probably already do, that the age of single-purpose infrastructure needs to be over, right? And when we're planning our infrastructure, we need to center the experience and quality of life, as well as acknowledge that everything we do is within the context of the broader environment. And so that is the expectation of the people that we serve in our various roles. And so we can't be planning things in silos any longer. We sort of need to swing that pendulum away from single purpose infrastructure. You know, for too long, we've sort of centered the movement of cars instead of the movement of people. We maybe have centered the commercial real estate development role, but I think that we can and should be pivoting toward honoring the ecosystem of our city. And funding really is sort of needs to catch up with that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mayor?
It's not going to reach.
It doesn't reach?
No. I have to use my principal voice.
There you go. You got this. You got this.
First of all, I would say in cities like Newark or cities, period, that are older cities, infrastructure becomes incredibly important. Older cities, infrastructure becomes incredibly important for us. Like we don't have any choice but to plan around people, make it holistic. Obviously, whenever we're developing, we have to think about water infrastructure. We have to think about flood mitigation. We have to think about the environment itself. We have to think about people's access from housing to jobs and employment. You have to think about those things because 50% of the people don't own cars, so we have to figure out how to build housing around transit or create transit villages or transit-oriented villages. We have to think about these things because the problems that we have kind of dictate how we begin to plan and how we begin to organize. And so we most of the planning we do is almost defensive, kind of planning because we're building in an environment that was already set for us, and we're trying to defend ourselves either against the elements, against the job market, against us being excluded. So we have to create development that is more inclusionary, at the same time. So we have to do that. We have no choice. And we have to force the zoning laws to kind of mirror what we need in the city. Green roofs, and we're not doing these things simply because we're trying to be do-gooders. We're doing these things to stay alive, right? So that the heat index in the city of Newark is such that the temperature in Newark is 10 times greater than the temperature anywhere else in the state, right, or in the country for that matter. You know, we high up there. So, you know, we have to plant trees. We have to put green roofs. We have to do these things in our infrastructure. So those are important. Besides the fact Newark is the third oldest city, one of the third oldest cities in the nation. So it means that everything we do is based on something that's old, and so we have to figure out how to make that those transitions happening through development. And we get developers to partner with us. If you want to make money in the city of Newark, you have to help take care of the people of the city of Newark one way or the other. The return on investment is high, then our return on investment is simply going to be the things that you put in our infrastructure that keeps our lives sustained and helps us to live a little longer than we would live if you did not develop this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I want to move on to the next question. Again, it's open to all the panelists. How can municipalities ensure that infrastructure and transportation projects are designed to meet the needs of the underserved or historically marginalized communities?
When you look, thank you so much. When you look at municipalities, you really have to take that community approach. And it is about our community. We're living there, but we also know our communities change and it's a constant thing. We have to have the redevelopment. We need to have transportation. And as our lives are moving on, but we also, just like Mayor just said, we have to be able to take care of our community. We have to take care of, what God has given us and, what, in our land and all, in order to make sure that, we can live healthy and prosperous lives. But equity assessments should be conducted for all major projects to identify and address gaps in access to transit, utilities, and other essential services. As we look at it, it's all about the planning process. We need to work really making sure we're working collectively together to take a look at this. Aligning with a lot of the commitment of promoting social equity, enhancing community health. You have to look at what your town really needs. But what's the best way? You need to work with your community, understand who it is that's living in your town. And all, you have individuals, do you have more commuters? Do you have individuals who work right here in your neighborhood? We have so many of our towns now where, people are working in New York and all, and they live in your towns, and you're taking a 30-minute ride. Listen, I drive every day 40 minutes, 45 minutes. Right, Mayor Laura?
Yes.
Yes, okay, all right. Every day, when
She's driving to Passaic.
And it's about the convenience, and a lot of things that we do. And, when municipalities are looking at those infrastructures, you really can cut down on community time. You can really help with the quality of life. But it takes everybody in order to be able to do it. It takes, with the mayor, it takes with your council, it takes with your state elected officials, and it takes with your federal elected officials to make sure that those resources are brought back, and making sure that, your water lines can handle what you're putting in your communities, making sure that they need to be changed, because over time nothing stays the same. As communities are growing, we have to make sure that we have everything in place and we grow along with it.
Right.
Thank you. Anyone else? Let me bring the mic over.
Yeah.
I could just build on it from sort of the planning perspective. How should we plan our projects to make the feedback that Assemblywoman Carter is talking about integrated truly? And one of the things that we've learned is it's not enough to just sort of tell the engineers and the technical specialists what we're hearing from the community. We have to bring them into the process. And one of the ways that we can do that is we can time and pace engagement along with the key milestones and decisions as they're being made. So there's a natural developmental cycle when they're planning projects. You take in information, you study data, you take it in and you work with it, you develop your hypotheses, and you come back out. And we need to teach we need to get them to think about engagement-related feedback as data that are just as relevant to the technical process as other data that they might be gathering, and that's one way that we can make that happen.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I think the point has been stressed that in order to ensure that you're addressing the needs of those who are most vulnerable and marginalized, they need to be engaged from the beginning as opposed to receiving all of the data and information at the end when the decisions have already been made. As we continue, the next question, again, open to any panelists. What funding mechanism or partnerships have been most successful in your city for supporting integrated redevelopment efforts that combine housing, transportation, and infrastructure? Mayor? Oh, excuse me.
I mean, obviously, the state and federal government around transit-oriented kind of development helps us to develop housing and commercial corridors in areas where transit exists and helps us create density in those areas at the same time. And so the funding coming from the state, funding coming from the federal government, but also local funding around, whether you have a tax abatement or a RAB that is associated with these projects, and gives us an opportunity to tell developers what we want and need in these projects specifically. Those are mechanisms that work for us in the city of Newark to require developers to add on to our water infrastructure, to build out our sewer infrastructure, or build out, making sure everybody's attached to our main pipes and grow those pipes. Because if you have a certain inch main that only brings a certain amount of water, when developers come, we make them expand that. Of course, they don't like it because they have to pay more, but it's necessary for them to pay more, especially if you're the first one in. I mean, obviously, people behind you are not going to have to pay that much because you've already done it. But you have to look at it this way. You can't build a housing without the water main being expanded, and the city doesn't have the money to do it. So you have to help us figure that piece out. I did want to add to the point that people say that we need to engage the community. I agree with that. And what happens when we start talking about the most, and I know this is not part of the question, but I just wanted to talk about this, the most marginalized folks in the community don't normally come to community meetings.
Good point. Yes.
And so usually people who come to those meetings are special interests and different folks who come to those meetings. The most marginalized people in the community don't come, and so we have to work harder at getting those folks out. But more importantly, we have to get data that represents what folks need, because what that data speaks for people who can't speak for themselves, right? Data is objective, it doesn't have a color, a race, a nationality. Data is objective. And so when you go get the data speaks for people. So usually what happens when you have those meetings, the same people come over and over and over and over again, and we start getting a small kind of perspective of what development should be or look like based on one group of people's idea of what that is. And so it's important for us as leaders to figure out ways to get more people into those meetings, or figure out a way to how to get their thoughts and ideas in the meeting if they can't be there.
I think that's an excellent point. Obviously, as you stated, Mayor, and it begs the question, how do you get them there? Because you need to get them. And I think I've witnessed you do this often, and many proactive and connected leaders, if they don't come to the meeting, then you take the meeting to them. You take them where they're going to be able to participate and engage, whether it is their house of worship, whether it is a community center, or if you have to have it at the park that is most frequented, wherever you need to get the information to the people, you do what you can with the resources available. And I think that's an extremely important point. Thank you so very much, Mayor. I'm going to now have some specific questions, and I remind all of the panelists, Darimar, who's there with the minutes, they let us know so we can try to be efficient and get to all of the questions. The specific questions will be given to each of the panelists, and I'm going to begin with Mayor Veller with the first question. Mayor, what are the unique infrastructure and transportation challenges facing smaller cities like Salem in terms of housing redevelopment?
In large part with Salem City, its size and geography. We are in the far southwest corner of the state. The closest city to Salem is actually Wilmington, Delaware.
Right.
So trying to get, and there's no transportation. We are a transportation desert.
That's right.
There's no bus that goes over the bridge to Wilmington, Delaware. That's right. You can get to Philadelphia in about 2 or 3 hours. You can go to Bridgeton to the Social Security office, which would take you 25 minutes by car, if you take a bus and go to Camden, get off, turn around, go back to Bridgeton, and then you can go back the other way. So it's an all-day trip.
Yeah.
So that's the situation kind of in Salem City. And that exists because Salem is a very small urban city in a very large rural area. And we have a very limited population, and New Jersey Transit considers it low ridership.
Right.
And since they don't do any type of microtransit, they only run a very limited amount of bus services along
That's it right
one
there.
main route. It goes basically around the county, doesn't really even go out of the county, so residents can't get public transportation outside. It's hard to get to a hospital, any type of services, so if it's not contained in the city,
And
it
it
makes
does.
it really, really difficult. And the high rates of poverty, again, creates challenges in doing housing development and other things in infrastructure. You know, as Mayor Baraka said, we're 350 years old.
Right.
So our infrastructure is failing, and we had to make a very difficult decision. We did send it out for referendum because there were people who were not happy with it, but we had to sell our water and sewer system off. We could not maintain it, so it was become the next Detroit, or get someone in here who could put that $54 million into this to do it. But with that, I have noticed that more developers are now coming into the city
Right.
because that they know that there is an infrastructure there when they do that large housing development, or when they want to bring those businesses into some of the abandoned factories that we have, data centers, broadband, that is now available to them where it wasn't available to them before. So, you know, it's a mixed bag in Salem. You know, so it's difficult in the size. That's I would say, our biggest challenge. And size goes to capacity. We don't have a big tax base. Actually, we have probably the smallest tax base in the state of New Jersey. You know, so it is tough, but we're moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next question goes to Mayor Ross Baraka. Mayor, how is Newark addressing the equity gap in public transportation and ensuring that affordable housing is accessible to key community amenities?
So, so that's like the problem Salem is talking about. I actually been there, and that's what they said for the most part. But you know, ultimately, you know, in terms of transportation, we do microtransit. So we are working on making investing in microtransit so more we can expand it greater across the city. What we have been doing is, particularly in the summertime and events that happen downtown, we take a van and we let people get on at the libraries in the city, and we begin to take them downtown Newark to the events that are taking place and back. And so trying to develop that model into a larger model where people can begin to use that as a means of moving around the city faster, more efficiently, and cheaper. We also, like most cities, invested in, but in a more affordable kind of rideshare program with the scooters and the bikes as well. And people use that. In fact, we had over 1 million rides last year of folks using the scooters and the bikes to get to work, to do different things like that. But the most important thing, however, is that, you know, when we build affordable housing, we have to begin figuring out how to build affordable housing next to areas where transit exists, where busing exists, where trains exist. We have to do that. There are big swaths of land that exist in a city right next to train stations, right next to bus stations. We have to begin to figure out how to get those properties and begin to use it for public use. Begin to develop affordable housing so people can live next to transit. If you lived in the South Ward of Newark, for example, and you worked at the airport, which if the highway didn't exist, you could probably walk there. It takes you over an hour to get to the airport on the bus from Elizabeth Avenue. It would probably take you an hour to get to the airport. We are working with New Jersey Transit to with the Port Authority to put a stop there or access point there on Freeland-Hyson so people can get to the airport, get to the train station, get places so people can walk there and get on the train, ride their bike there and get on the train and go to the airport, the train station, and everywhere else from there. But ultimately, we have to figure out how to expand New Jersey Transit in such a way to make sure folks have access to transit, either through bus or train, not just in Newark and Salem and many places like that as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor. This next question goes to Assemblywoman Carter. Assemblywoman, what legislative measures are being taken to support infrastructure and transportation improvements in relation to affordable housing in your district?
Thank you. All right, so I have Legislative District 22, and we have the Raritan Valley line. And there, when you look at it, transportation is so key in helping to redevelop or even develop your communities. And not everybody has a car, and when we look at, we've had an influx of constituents coming in, and they want to be in our towns because they work in New York. They don't want to, they're tired of that commute and living in a New York lifestyle with the hustle, the bustle. They want to be able to come, still work in the city and all. One of the things that we have with Raritan Valley Line is we've continuously to push for a one-seat ride. And that's very key. When you look at the Raritan Valley Line and you look at the municipalities in my district, when you have Cranford, when you have Westfield, when you have Plainfield, when you have Scotch Plains, and going on along those lines, you can see we have had development, but it's also we have affordable housing and all. And when you're looking at the infrastructures and you're looking at the transportation, we need to make sure that, we're developing accordingly to what we can have for our communities. And one of the things that the mayor just, talked about previously is making sure that, even just around your transportation, that you have the things necessary for people when they're utilizing transportation. Plainfield is doing the, around the North Avenue, and they're working on a walking path.
Pedestrian wall.
Yes, pedestrian. See, that's why we have people in the audience to help us out. Yes. Especially my councilwomen. Okay, but when you look at it, and you have to take a look at it, and you may need to change and really be insightful to be able to change your community of what it looks for right now. And it's a scary thing to our residents. They don't want that. They don't want overdevelopment. They don't want to have things, that really think are change. But some of them are really necessary when you're really looking at how to really bring a lot of the legislation into it and working with our communities to be able to really move some of these projects forward. And as we look at legislation should not be where we cuff municipalities, okay, and force them to do certain things, but giving them the option to be able to work with their communities, to partner with their communities and bring what their residents are looking forward to see. But as we do this, we also need to make sure that, there is some funding in there. And that's when we have to work on the state level. We have to work on the federal level to bring those dollars and bring them down to our municipalities. And working with our county government, through the CDBG grants and all of those affordable things that, you can work with to transform your communities. Our communities are not the same as they were 50 years ago, 100 years ago. We have to have our communities where they satisfy the needs of what is happening today. We have a lot of individuals that are now working from home. We have a lot of individuals that, don't want to drive a car. It's too congested, but we also need to make sure that we have the right priorities in place. A lot of it has to deal with us communicating, and like we've always said, we've said up here a couple of times, you have to do that planning. You have to be able to make it, and where you get off the train, you can go, listen, on my way home, I can stop at the grocery store. On my way home, I can pick up my laundry. On my way home, I can do my dry cleaning. I can drop off my animal to the groomers, things like that. But we have to make sure that it's something that we as a community all agree on.
Thank you. The next question is for Carly. Carly, you led the development of the Resilient New Jersey planning processes for resilient northeastern New Jersey and resilient Raritan River and Bay communities, which included 11 New Jersey municipalities across Essex, Hudson, and Middlesex counties. What were some key lessons learned and outcomes from that process that relate to our conversation today?
Yeah, thank you. And so just a question for the audience. How many folks in the room have heard of the Resilient New Jersey processes? So that's a lesson learned right there, right? Because these are very large, multi-jurisdictional planning processes, lots and lots of engagement, but still very challenging to get the word out. For Northeastern New Jersey, which included Newark, we had a community advisory council, which was made up of representatives from the population that supported us in planning around engagement. We had a variety of nonprofit partners involved, and then we also had a massive advertising campaign across PATH and New Jersey Transit buses. So on the side of the buses, and still so many people don't know about the initiative. So that, tells me that there's still a lot of work, and that's a lesson learned for us that we're constantly looking to improve. And then the conversation also has been talking about data. Mayor Baraka talked about the importance of data, and Northeastern New Jersey in particular has significant confluence of a variety of different types of risk. A lot of land area in those municipalities was built on trash. It's built on fill, which is not very high above high tide line, right? And then there's over 800 known contaminated sites across Newark, Jersey City, Bayonne, and Hoboken alone. That's known. We also have significant urban heat island effects in those areas, significant social vulnerability, and on top of the site contamination, we have limited access to green space. Some of those cities have 90% impervious surface. And so when you are dealing with that kind of a magnitude of questions around how do we help make things better, how do we plan for the future, one of the things that we did was layer all of those data layers on top of one another to see what kind of a story they told. And we also pulled in different evaluation criteria that came from community engagement, and we prioritized different contaminated sites, and we created what we like to call the resilient transformation pipeline. Because a lot of site contamination, a lot of the processes we use to address site contamination is like site by site. We don't look at it at a landscape level. We don't plan for these things kind of at that landscape level. And so this concept was, okay, let's prioritize which sites can help. If we made a transformation here, we could improve access to green space. We could address some of this stormwater flooding, and we could address the heat island that is most urgent. And then the second question becomes, well, how do we fund it? Because the interesting thing about site contamination is, and available funding sources, is we have maybe the Brownfields program that could help us address site contamination, right? And then we have like FEMA's hazard mitigation assistance programs that could help us do some hazard mitigation, build some stormwater detention, right? And then we have like Green Acres that could help us turn this into a park. But none of them can do all three of those things. And so that is where we have to really be thinking outside of the box and get these different programs that are working separately. I mean, one of the key outcomes of this process was people telling us, we need government to work together. We're not supposed to be in silos. Like, we experience all of this stuff in one context. You need to plan and act in one context. So the idea of the pipeline was also, how do we get these programs working together? And so that's ambitious, but that's something that I'm hoping that we'll continue to see move forward in that kind of thinking to help us address these issues.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Carly, highlighting the fact that bringing programs together are paramount for the success of projects in our communities is extremely important here. I want to pivot in terms of the order of the questions, because you were mentioning, obviously, contamination in brownfields. I'm going to go to the Mayor Ross Baraka, and ask you, Newark has undergone significant redevelopment in recent years. Can you share how the city has integrated infrastructure improvements with housing development, particularly in brownfield sites?
Well, the brownfield sites is separate as, the brownfield sites is separate as was stated. People have to find money. I mean, I would say 90% of the sites you develop in Newark is going to be a brownfield. There's going to be some environmental concern with those sites. Newark is historically an industrial city. Most of those companies that came polluted the land, the water, the air, and left. And some of them are still around, but they've done that. So most of the sites, when you get land, when you acquire the land and you get site control, the first part of that is to remediate that site. And so you get money from the federal government and state government, as was stated, to help remediate those sites. There's also gaps that may exist in your project because you had to do that remediation, and the city, in some instances, tries to fill those gaps with the dollars that we have available. But we create a zoning ordinance, and the zoning ordinance really governs how you develop in the city. The zoning ordinance and zoning ordinance across the state are different. There should be some uniformity, I would imagine, across the state, but there isn't. There's almost 600 municipalities, 600 ways of doing business in the state. And so there should be some uniformity around the zoning that allows for inclusionary zoning, that allows for environmental mitigation. All of these things should be boilerplates across the state. And our zoning ordinance requires developers to do very specific things in their projects that helps us with infrastructure. You have to put a green roof. You have to plant trees. You have to do certain amount of setbacks. You need flood mitigation. You have to, pay water connection fees that are associated with us trying to expand our water infrastructure in such a way that it benefits the entire city, not just your site, or that entire area, not just your site. So the zoning ordinances allow us to do that. And in negotiating around tax abatements, we make sure that we put those in the negotiation as well, so when people are developing, they also keeping in mind the environmental impact and the infrastructure impact that it has on the city. So we put it right in the development deal from the very beginning.
Excellent. Thank you very much. This next question goes to Mayor Veller. How does Salem balance rural and urban redevelopment needs while addressing transportation connectivity?
We're taking it back old school now. I don't have a lot of hope sometimes, with New Jersey Transit, and, we have a long way to go balancing that transportation. So we really do need to get back to more of a sustainable way of life, taking it back to walkability, to doing more mixed use as we're redeveloping these vacant and abandoned properties in the community, bringing back the corner stores in the neighborhoods. If we had never lost those when the supermarket closed, it wouldn't have hurt the way that it hurt now. So now we're a food desert on top of it, and we don't have these corner stores to fall back on, because somewhere in the 60s and 70s, when they changed to a more suburban model of zoning, they stopped doing all these things. So, we sat down the other day and we're going with smaller lots, looking at putting those starter homes back up, because you need to get people out of rentals and into those starter homes so you can even open up rentals to bring down the rent. Using the smaller lots, doing the accessory dwelling units. And Salem used to have that. We had houses behind houses. We had corner stores downstairs and livable spaces upstairs. And like I said, somehow they got away from that. So we need to bring that back in, because the transportation issue is a long and hard one. And I can do more faster to get residents in and to help people make things more sustainable. It's a question of what came first, the Cowboys or the saloon. If you don't have any people in the town, you're not going to be able to sustain the transportation when you get it in there. So, we have to just walk it back a few steps.
Thank you. The next question goes to Assemblywoman Linda Carter. Assemblywoman, what role do you see the state government playing in addressing the challenges of connectivity between housing, transportation, and essential community services?
Again, we need to make sure that we're partnering with the municipalities and not coming in as the huge big brother and everything. As we look at, state government and the role that they can play, and even some of the things that Mayor Raz Baraka has said, we need to have some similar across the state, but also give the ability and have the towns to have their uniqueness to be able to grow based off of their towns. All of our towns are different sizes. Let's be very real. And our communities are very different. Some communities are very similar. But as we all are living, we are all individuals. We live very differently in certain areas. We have to make sure that there's equity. We need to make sure that there's things and the resources necessary for everybody in our communities. When you look at the connectivity between housing, transportation, and essential community services, we need to make sure that, our communities have access to all of it, and not, just in one zip code, but all zip codes have access to that. When I look at the Raritan Valley line and us trying to get that one-seat ride, that's a huge deal for my community. Making sure that, we can get on that train and get over to New York in one seat, not having to change all the time, which adds on time, okay, onto our commute, making it from, one seat ride can go from maybe a 25-minute ride, and now you might have to get home or get to work in an hour and 15 minutes. It's a huge difference. But we need to make sure that, when you have your housing, when you have your transportation and everything, that, we put the legislation in place that can meet the needs. And we have to push. We as a community have to push for what our community needs, but we have to work collectively together. If we're not doing that, then what ends up happening is we're going to set our communities back even further. When I look at my community and all, my town has been there for a long time. We have housing that needs to still help, to keep my parents, to keep my aunts and my uncles living in their homes. We need to make sure that they have the resources. And as you get older, you're going to do less of driving. We need to make sure that they can still get around and all. And that all has to deal with us making sure with the master plan, that it's the visionaries that we're doing to make sure that all of our stakeholders are there in order to make sure that we get the resources we need to move our communities forward.
Thank you very much. Carly, this question is for you. You're also a trustee for the village of Warwick. Located in the town, obviously there's been a lot of news regarding the significant wildfires that have, or the wildfires that have impacted the area lately. The village is a small rural agricultural community that is experiencing development pressures, a housing shortage, and climate impacts. What tools are you all using in your toolbox to help address these concerns? Let me bring you the mic.
Yeah, thank you. And so 5,000 acres have burned over the course of the last couple weeks, and they are about 90% controlled, so that's great. But that kind of speaks to, in today's times, where you have this incredible natural resource, and it also, when we have severe drought, which was unexpected, it's about the worst that we've seen in 120 years, it brings with it a whole different level of risk. So Warwick is about 2 square miles. It's got 7,000 people in it. So it's this dense little urban enclave that's nestled amidst all of this agriculture. It's an Appalachian Trail community. And what was really fascinating for this community, which was founded in the 1700s, was that during COVID, it was really found in a lot of ways. And so we started experiencing significant development pressure. And all of the infrastructure is aging. Our village itself has its own water treatment facilities, its own wastewater treatment facilities. We take care of all of the infrastructure. So there's big questions there. But one of the things in terms of being able to balance the growth and the sustainability and make sure that you have the water supply for these folks that are coming in. And one of the things that the town has done that I think is really beneficial for a community like ours is the purchase of development rights, but strategically. So we've purchased development rights for our watershed. We've also purchased development rights to safeguard parks and recreation at the same time that we are taking there's no silver bullet here, right? I think what you're hearing is that there are many different things that have to happen in order to address these needs and to improve housing at the same time. So one of the things that we're working hard on is improving and increasing the missing middle of housing. And you can do that through a form-based code, which is something that we're exploring. We're working on shifting our zoning code to be more of a form-based code, which means that rather than sort of dictating bedrooms and units and things like that, it's more about kind of the feel and the experience of the properties, right? So that's in the vein of what we've been talking about as well. And so through that, we've been converting parking lots to multi-unit townhouse complexes and more mixed-use facilities that have, on the ground floor stores, and going back to the roots of that, we're actually creating that anew, and also converting historical properties to add sort of in-period second floors to increase housing. So those are some of the things that we've been doing, and we've really been able to kind of think creatively in this way. We're very low budget, small rural community, but because we have such a vibrant stakeholder kind of engagement process, most weekends you'll see me or another trustee at the farmers market trying to get feedback, or we have all kinds of different stakeholder advisory groups that are coming up with these ideas. So we're really not alone, and that's been super helpful to help us kind of begin to shave down on some of these issues.
Thank you so very much, Carly, again, and I think that we can all appreciate the fact that there's no panacea approach to resolving the issue, so a multifaceted approach to addressing the concerns, as well as proactive initiatives to engage the community in collaborative efforts, considering all of the resources or opportunities available, make a huge difference. Mayor Veller, if I may, going back to transportation, could you discuss any recent or upcoming transportation projects in Salem that aim to improve residents' access to essential services, particularly for those in affordable housing?
The county has some services. They do have like a micro-transit, a scoot service, and we rely on that a lot. They have recently applied for a grant to expand those services in Salem City. And that is specifically for, lower income, disabled people, senior citizens to get to essential services. The other thing that I've done is we've recently worked with community partners again to submit a grant, more of a strategic planning grant, to look at what routes would be feasible for a micro transit program. With Salem, there's no one place that we can say everybody works here. There's no main industrial center where that this is going to work. Everybody works all over the place, so given limited resources, we need to kind of figure out what the best routes would be. Would microtransit even be something that would work? So it's really still in the very basic planning stages as we move forward as to how we're going to, deal with transportation issues.
Excellent. Mayor Baraka, I know you mentioned this earlier regarding the connection for individuals in certain areas of Newark and access or proximity to the airport. In regards to that specific statement that you made, what innovative transportation solutions outside of that has Newark implemented to enhance connectivity between new housing developments and the broader urban area?
All right, so most of the housing developments that are not next to like main transit, or thank God in Newark we have a connectivity in terms of bus lines. That it needs to be better and more efficient. Obviously, and that's New Jersey Transit. We need to have a whole conversation about New Jersey Transit, which is probably a whole nother panel. Love to be on that one too. But us trying to figure out all of the inclusionary zoning units that exist in the city. Many of them are in the downtown arts and education district, trying to create transportation to move people around that community, around that area, is important to us. Whether you're talking about Martin Luther King, the ferry, the lower Broadway, all the way over, to the south side of Broad, trying to move people up and down. And so us creating microtransit in that area has been incredibly important for us. So us partnering with the downtown community through restaurants, the universities, and everybody else to help chip in to create microtransit that everybody can benefit from in the area, but also essentially begin to benefit folks who move downtown and live in affordable units, who don't have cars, who are relying on public transportation to be able to use that model to move around the area, to go shopping, to get to work, to go hang out, to eat, to do all those various things. So that is what we're working on in Newark, microtransit, and prayerfully, nobody thought we would have to go back to jitneys, but this is where we are in America, while everybody else is invested in public transit. all over the world. The public transportation system is becoming more and more advanced and cheaper. In fact, our public transportation system is old and expensive. We have not invested in it in such a way, so we're going backwards instead of forwards. So you have all of these communities trying to figure out microtransit, ways to get around, because we have not invested in the public infrastructure the way we should. And that really is the discussion that we should be having, why we have not invested in public transportation in the way that it needs to be invested in. And cities don't have the ability to invest in public transportation at that level, so we have to be creative about how we move people around. But really, it's the state and federal issue of how to advance public transit for people.
I think we're seeing a common theme as both mayors described the needs of the residents in terms of connectivity and innovative approaches to transportation. In fact, Mayor Vela had shared that they have to assess whether one even makes sense in the community, obviously, when you consider where do people want to go. They want to go shopping. Maybe they need transportation for specific services, their doctor's office or wherever they need to go, and they don't have cars. So thank you for that insight, Mayor. And Assemblywoman Carter, in one of your previous responses when we were discussing infrastructure and transportation, you had said that one has to consider the impact it has on the community and whether they don't want to encourage overdevelopment because of everything that can affect them. With that in mind, the question for you that I have is, how do you balance the need for redevelopment with maintaining the integrity of existing communities in urban areas?
I'm going to tell you something. A lot of us, that chose to move into our neighborhood chose it because of sometimes the aesthetics, things that are happening and all. We need to really make sure that we're addressing what it's going to look like in the future. So as you're looking at it, we need to make sure, as we are trying to maintain the integrity, that what got us there and everything, that we're still maintaining. We have listen, Plainfield has 100-year-old houses. We have mansions there. And you know what? Housing preservation. There are certain things in our communities that you have to keep it the exact same way. But we are consistently changing. How do we do that? We have to really kind of make sure that the development and things that we're doing still take that into consideration. And we have to also take into consideration the materials and all that were here 50 years ago and 100 years ago are not the same and all. A lot of it was not good for our environment and what it has done, and we need to look in the future. But we still need to make sure that we're putting legislation on the books that we can still maintain that and work with our municipalities, work with our counties, and work with federal government to make sure that we have all of the right priorities in place based off of your master plan and everything. We need to make sure that we are, our communities, listen, when you look at an urban community, they're growing. We need to make sure that we have a lot. You have various levels of income. People want to be able to, get to their jobs, get to them quickly. But we also have to consider what the future is going to look like. So as addressing that, we need to really make sure that, we don't get stuck in the past, but we really have a fit plan to make sure that we're bringing all the necessary resources to the table to make sure that we can move ourselves to the future. Look at it. We went from horse and buggy, okay, to steam engines. We have vehicles, gas, and we have a lot of electric cars, currently. But we also, a lot of people still need to have that public transportation. We need to make sure that we're leaving our environment in a better place, for years to come, and for, those that are coming behind us. But if we don't work collectively together to make sure that, and we still want the aesthetics and everything that we have that brought us to our neighborhoods, we need to just make sure that we hold on to it.
Thank you very much. At this point, I want to open it up for the audience, for any questions from the audience. Anyone who would, yes, please. If you have a specific question for an individual, just let us know. So. Okay.
Sorry about that. Yes, so I hear you about community engagement. What I'm thinking is, I know that the line item is quite small. whether it's someone that is submitting as a consultant through a proposal or the RFPs that you're putting out. So is there an opportunity to build into there more equity, where we're saying, if you are going to engage with our community, we want you to have equity impact statement included in there, or require that of them? I just think that there's a missing opportunity there, and how can we actually get people to be more robust in how they reach out to our communities? Thank you.
Would any of our panelists want to tackle that?
You want to jump on that? Show up your alley in it?
You want me to answer?
Yeah, then I'll follow you.
Thank you, Carly.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's important, and it has to go all the way through that thread. And so we are seeing, and we have been seeing, that kind of thing also included in funding requirements. So if you're going to submit an application for federal funding, then you have to demonstrate how you've been engaging the community and how you've considered equity in that. I think, and then as a planner that works a lot with engineers, one of the things that I'm constantly communicating to them is that equity is essential to technical integrity. So if the outcomes of your project are inequitable, it lacks in technical integrity. So whenever they ask the question of, this soft, squishy stuff, I don't know what this has to do with me, then we have that conversation. And I think that has to be part of the way we think about our RFPs, the way that we think about our contracts, and the way that we think about our project development writ large.
Thank you.
There is something like that for the environmental stuff. Like, there's a cumulative impact ordinance that exists in the state, and then we have one in Newark too that says if you are developing something and there has a negative cumulative impact as it relates to the environment, then you can't do it, or you have to mitigate for that. There's nothing like that for equity. Any ordinance or law that says that if this kind of exacerbates inequity or further marginalized communities that were already marginalized, then it either can't be done or you have to mitigate for those outcomes. I think that is something that we should be thinking about in the state and locally as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, please. Your name?
Hi, I'm a newly elected member of a governing body in Essex, but from Plainfield, so would give a shout out to the Assemblywoman.
Thank you.
Mayor Baraka said that we should have a whole panel on New Jersey Transit, and I think that's very, very true. One other thing that I'm starting to feel like we really need to have a whole panel or a whole day on is how the era of the buggy is going to turn back into the era of the buggy with the self-driving car very, very soon. When you fly to Phoenix right now, you are asked when you open your Uber app if you want a human driver or not, and they assume you don't. And this is going to change not just people being in cars, but everything about our built environment. Parking will not be a constraint. Microtransit networks will create themselves, and they will be very, very inexpensive, almost cost-free. Cars will be very, very little. And the question would just be, is anybody talking about it or working on it? Because I'm starting to be panicked that my own community is not, and we're going to start to see these changes happening without having done any work.
Okay, is there anyone that would like to address this in regards to, are there conversations occurring regarding the unmanned, or rather without having a human driver, these vehicles? And if you have any suggestions or approaches, or perhaps do you agree there should be a whole day panel on it? Sure.
So Portland, I think it was, created a car master plan, which I think is actually a great idea, because so much of transportation planning has historically centered the car rather than the movement of people. And so that's something that I'm pushing my community to do. there's also, oh my gosh, I just blanked on her name, but she was the former deputy assistant secretary for HUD under Obama. But she raised this issue like 8 years ago, and the concern that there would be so many autonomous vehicles driving around, and they have this idea that they're actually going to drive around in posses because they're going to hit like the most efficient routes. But the space that this could create also presents an intense opportunity. And we're often seeing communities, instead of doing minimum parking spaces, they're now switching to maximum parking spaces. And I think that we're still a ways off from that being really attractive, because even in my community, it has maximum parking spaces, and where there's still arguments about where are all the cars going to go, right? But there's a healthy tension right now that I think provides us an opportunity to be planning to use that space more efficiently.
Thank you.
Would be used for cars parking.
Do any of the panelists want to add to that? Are there any additional questions? Oh, I believe we have one.
History has a strange sense of coming back to us. I hear these mayors saying they want to have public transportation. Several years ago, we went to getting rails to trails. We took away all the infrastructure of the railroads that ran between small communities, and we turned them into bike or not use rails. We all have communities where we see railroad tracks that go nowhere that are overgrown. We now are asking to bring back something that existed before that was very practical. And this is where it gets very confusing. Now, we all know that the state of New Jersey is a limited size. We know anything you do on buying property is extremely expensive. So now we're trying to get back to spending all this money to bring back things we already had before. We had these small connections between towns. And now we wanted to bring them back, is what I'm hearing from you, and we destroyed them.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mayor.
If you look at the history in South Jersey, and I did just recently, we used to have trains that one went from Atlantic City to Camden, which is the Atlantic City rail line. We had one that went from Salem to Voorhees. And what happened was, before they could merge the trains and develop these train lines in South Jersey, the federal government came in and put all their money into roads, because cars were the next big thing. So then everybody follows the money. You know, gas was cheap, everything was gonna, and that was the way that it was going to go. And then the trains fell off. The Voorhees line held on for a while, and then it's just non-existent. But you're right, we can still see the tracks that are there. The Atlantic City rail line dropped the Camden trips, and now it's just to Atlantic City to Philadelphia. But yeah, and the tracks are in Salem, and I would do anything to be able to bring those little tracks back. Yeah, so you're right. Yeah, that's the way it went.
Mayor Baraka, you had something to add?
She answered it perfectly.
Oh, okay. Anyone else? Are there any other questions? There are no other questions. I want to give the opportunity for the panelists to share some last points, or wrap up. Any closing remarks or any additional comments that you would like to make, perhaps something that wasn't fully covered. We'll begin with Assemblywoman Carter. Assemblywoman?
Thank you. One of the things that, transportation, our livelihoods, infrastructure, our quality of life are all intertwined here. We need to make sure that we take into consideration and work collectively together to make sure that we are moving our cities and our towns and everything really forward. We have to think about the future. What we do today impacts directly what we're doing in the future. But you know what? We also have to have sustainability. We also need to make sure that we're giving access and equity to all, because of the fact that what we do can keep some people where they are and never have them grow. We need to make sure that, when we're looking at housing, when we're looking at affordability, when we're looking at transportation, that we consider and take into consideration all individuals and making sure that they have the right stepping stool to be able to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Veller? Oh, yes. Any closing
No,
statement, wrap-ups, or?
No, I don't. Like I said, we're doing the best that we can with a city that is that small and that distressed, with no we don't have anything to start with, so we're literally starting from scratch, trying to build this out. But I have a lot of confidence in this city council and the things that we're doing now, that within a few years, we'll be able to get some transportation in and help the residents be able to get around a little better.
Thank you. Carly?
Sure. Yeah, I want to say it's just an honor to sit here with you all today and hear your ideas and perspectives. And this group has accomplished incredible things and will continue to do so. And I guess my final parting thought is just about the movement toward this more holistic planning and thinking about the long-term consequences of the decisions that we make. The Mayor Veller brought up the federal government funding roads, and sort of we're looking at long-term cross-generational impacts of those expenditures and trying to correct for those things. And so the more holistic that we can be in our planning, the more inclusive in our planning, the more that we can see our communities as ecosystems in and of themselves, I think the better.
Thank you. Let me have the mic. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to first echo those comments because they're right on the money in terms of us looking at this in a holistic way and being more thoughtful about how we plan, and not just planning for the sake of making sure things are sustainable, but planning also for equity, because a lot of times we have plans and the plans are centered around the individuals that are the most privileged. And so those plans help very few people and not a majority of the people. Majority of the people suffer from the plans that we make for a few. And so we have to begin figuring out how we begin to plan for the overwhelming majority of the people in our communities, and how do we do that in an inclusive way that we add equity to that. An example is this whole fight around affordable housing that's happening in the state right now. This whole fight over affordable housing, saying we need affordable housing. Everybody wants affordability to go down, but nobody wants to build housing in their neighborhood. So, which makes no sense to me. But this whole fight of the state pushing affordability on people without any inclusive planning, without bringing people together and really figuring this out. But two, nobody is actually saying that we should start building housing next to places where there's transit immediately. Like, we can do that immediately. Let's identify the places in the state where there's transit and have meetings talking to people about how to do that first, because that's where it's going to be the most successful and the most holistic. I mean, that doesn't happen because we're thinking about these things in silos and based on our different privileges or positions in society, and not really collectively how do we actually solve these problems. So I would echo those sentiments, and I think mayors every day have to solve problems that other people create, and this is what we're trying to do in our cities. Well, thank you for coming out. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I want to express my deep appreciation on behalf of the Urban Mayors Association for the participation of the panelists, your thoughtful and most insightful responses to the questions. I want to thank each and every one of you for participating. These are the topics that mean so much to us and affect our day-to-day lives, especially as we plan out for the future. This is going to conclude our workshop. Again, thank you so very much. And to all of the staff, to Barbara, George Johnson, Keisha, obviously everyone who worked together, we thank you so very much.